Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, let me just say that given the errors and omissions that everybody concedes and knows were in the FISA warrant, no official would say now that they'd sign that warrant knowing that it had errors and omissions. So that's an obvious question. What I want to make sure of is that it doesn't lead to the wrong implication that because officials wouldn't sign a warrant that they knew to have errors and omissions in it, that had they found out that there were errors and omissions in it, they would have ended the investigation. That is not a logical leap. That is not a correct assertion or a correct implication. What you do is you go back and you clear out the errors and omissions. You take whatever personnel action is necessary against the people responsible for those errors and omissions, and then you proceed with your case with a correct warrant. So let's just make sure that that is clear. I think we agree on that, but I want to clarify that. I also got to say, I've got no objection to us pursuing endlessly the question of this Crossfire Hurricane investigation, but it does irk me that we do this at the expense of other things we could be looking at and should be looking at. If you haven't read Judge Gleason's brief for a federal judge in the Flynn case, it's one of the most astonishing pieces. First of all, it's just an amazingly good piece of legal writing. So if you're a law student out there or a young lawyer, go read it just to watch the skill of a terrific advocate at work. But the allegations and concerns that a retired federal judge on behalf of a sitting federal judge has made about the Department of Justice are unprecedented. And what attention have we given that? None. There is very likely mischief behind the antitrust letter that was sent out to auto companies who had the nerve to try to interfere with the fossil fuel industry's scheme to undo vehicle emission standards. There's no support for that. It's since been withdrawn. The hearing continues to be postponed, and I still have got zero evidence or information in relation to my requests about that. We have what appears to have been a tanked FBI investigation in the Kavanaugh hearings, and I've asked questions about that, to which I've had no answer whatsoever. We've had multiple resignations in protest by career DOJ officials under Attorney General Barr, and we can't get any answers to what's going on behind those resignations in protest. And now 2 federal courts have written official opinions, decisions, excoriating the work of the Office of Legal Counsel, and nothing on that. So we're highly selective in what we choose to look into, and we've been extremely solicitous of the stonewalling and non-responsiveness of this Department of Justice. Well, guys, we're about to go into a Biden Department of Justice. And if the standard you want to set is that the Department of Justice doesn't have to answer any letters, doesn't have to answer any QFRs, only does things for the majority party, congratulations, because you've done a really good job of setting that precedent in this committee. You have allowed an effective policy at the Department of Justice and the FBI of non-responsiveness. And I'll tell you how bad it is. The chairman actually brought the Deputy Attorney General into a meeting with me, thank you for that courtesy, at my request, because we were getting no answers to QFRs, no answers to letters, just a complete blow-off. If I recall correctly, that meeting was in June. You know how many answers I've gotten since June? After that meeting with the Deputy Attorney General about unanswered questions? None. 0. So you all have set one heck of a precedent if you think you're going to come back with questions about the Biden Department of Justice. You have set a precedent that the Department of Justice and the FBI don't have to answer our questions. And that if you're in the majority, that's cool. You're just going to let that ride. So I have to take this opportunity to ask some back questions to a former FBI official because we don't have that. So let me ask Mr. McCabe, the FBI does pretty much everything by policy and procedure, in my recollection as a U.S. attorney working with FBI agents. Were there FBI policies and procedures related to how a tip line operates?
Yes, sir. Yeah, there are policies about that.
And where would I go to find those policies and procedures? I was able to find one statement on the internet. Are you aware of other places that we should go to look more specifically, since we haven't been able to get straight answers?
I don't know if I can give you the perfect place to look, but the tip line, the way the FBI handles tip lines has changed a lot in the last 5 or so years. So they're all managed centrally out of our facility in West Virginia that kind of handles all the incoming calls and then sends leads or information, directs it to the field offices that would be responsible for following up on those things. So
who has authority to set one up? Who makes the call? An agent says, I want a tip line on this case. Where does that decision travel through the FBI? You don't get a tip line in every case. You get tip lines in some cases. Why? How does that work?
Typically, the Office of Public Affairs would be involved in that suggestion and that kind of, hey, if it's a particular case that we think requesting the public's active involvement will help.
So the agent would ask his agent in charge, and the agent in charge would clear it with the Public Affairs Office, and then the process for a tip line kicks in?
That's the best of my recollection, sir.
Okay. And then once the tip line is up and running and information starts to come in, what does it look like when you're going through those tips? Obviously, a lot of them are going to be just nutty people calling in. Some of them are going to have very significant evidence potentially in them, and you're going to have to go and dig into that. Who oversees that to make sure that that is legitimate and that evidence is actually being dug out of a tip line call?
So those calls, once the line is set up, those calls would go into our Criminal Justice Information Services Division in West Virginia. And the telephone the operators, the specialists who answer those calls, have a process for how they memorialize the information that comes off that tip and who it gets sent to, and whether it should be brought to someone's attention immediately if it's something that involves possibly a threat to life. So there are kind of detailed policies around that. I'm not really in a position to be able to tell you great detail about them off the top of my head.
Okay, I'm over my time, so let me ask a last very short question, and that is, if an FBI tip line were set up and information were collected through that FBI tip line, and then nobody looked at what had been brought in, it was just all dumped in a file and there was no further investigative work at all, would that be consistent with FBI policy or procedure?
From the way you've described the situation, sir, I'd have to say no. I'm not aware of a specific situation that fits that model, but presumably the information that comes in off the tip line gets put into our Guardian system, and that's how all of our incoming tip information is managed and assigned and investigated at its most kind of initial level. So no, information that comes into the FBI should never just be put aside and not followed up on.
Thank you, Chairman, for the extra time.
Yeah, absolutely. And as to the antitrust issue you've been talking about, the committee deserves to have a hearing on that. We had the Barrett nomination, so I'm going to get with Senator Lee and make sure that we can, in a reasonable fashion, get answers to the questions you've raised. I think we owe that to not only you, but the committee itself.
Hearings can be pretty meaningless if we haven't been given any documents, if we've been blown off by the FBI.
We've got some time left, and we will look into that. As to Justice Kavanaugh, I think you got from my point of view, pretty good scrutiny. So